Sorry. So many things have piled up. And Dad, you know what I mean? Nika muttered, raking up last year's grass. The cemetery had already dried out. If she had appeared 2 weeks earlier, she would have gotten stuck in the mud. Grandma's grave was fresh. Less than a year had passed. It was slightly washed away. Grandpa died 8 years ago. Nika's father kept the place next to Grandma for himself. For Dad, Nika is a late child. The youngest, the most beloved. He taught her, tried to control her. But in reality, everything is quite the opposite. Nika looked after her father. At 69, he behaved like a capricious, uncontrollable boy who caused his daughter a lot of problems every day. There was no one to look after him. His mother was 18 years younger than him. When his father grew old and his mother was just blossoming, she divorced him right away. Then his grandmother looked after him. And when she passed away, all the worries about her father fell entirely on his daughter. A cold wind was blowing through the cemetery. A flock of crows began to call each other. Like on that tragic day, Grandmother was buried to the heartbreaking accompaniment of screaming, impudent birds. This part of the cemetery was practically deserted. A silent man stood not far from Nika. He looked at the fresh grave. The wind wiped a tear from his cheek. Nika occasionally glanced at the young man, whose lips did not move, and she was used to talking to her deceased relatives, telling them how she was doing, how her dad was doing, apologizing for him coming to visit so rarely. The call interrupted the man's solitude. He looked sharply at Nika, who took her phone out of her jacket pocket. His gaze lingered, as if the man had just noticed that he was not alone here. Yes. Nika clutched the phone with her shoulder and was stunned. What she heard on the other end of the line shocked her. She jumped up, dropping the phone. She managed to catch it and muttered incoherently, "Tell me the address." "I'll be there now." Dad, adventurer, can't live in peace. This time he's really stuck. Sorry. Nika apologized in front of her relatives' graves. She hadn't had time to clean up, only partially removed the withered grass. "I'll be there next week, I promise. If she can get her father out." Nika found herself behind the wheel of a domestic jalopy. The engine rattled, coughed and stalled. How untimely. Although, is there a suitable moment for a breakdown? It won't start. Father would have given the steering wheel a good slam now, and Nika stroked it affectionately and tearfully asked, "Please, my dear, start it." For the last time. Persuasion had no effect. There was no point in trying to climb under the hood with a smart look. She would look stupid, because Nika didn't understand any of these things. Given her driving experience, the most she could do was drive up to the gas pump on the right side. "Can I help you?" the man shouted loudly. The same one with the silent, mournful, stone face. Now his face began to express itself. The man squinted from the wind, which ruffled his blonde hair and inflated his jacket like a ship's sail. Nika almost choked from the gust of wind, lowering the window in front of his face. "Do you understand?" "A little." The man fiddled around under the hood for a few minutes. Nika didn't believe in a miracle, but at the man's signal she turned the key. The engine didn't start right away, but it still started up and began to rumble, producing the most blissful sound in the world. "Do I owe you something?" Nika asked without getting up from behind the wheel. "Me? No. Her." He patted the roof of the old jalopy. You better take it to the service before the engine breaks down. It's easier to throw this tub away, Nika joked sadly, than to repair the engine. It's high time to replace it. Yes, the repair will cost a pretty penny. I understand, he agreed. Thanks again. Sorry, I'm in a hurry. The man nodded, walked away from the car, which jerked forward in short jerks. What a shame. Yes, Nika has trouble driving, and only her father can handle this old jalopy. But the man had a crossover, which caught up with her on the first turn, but did not overtake. The man adjusted to a slow speed, not typical for a situation where you need to hurry. Nika was careful, focused on the road, in the mirrors. At the next turn, the crossover followed her. Is she really afraid that the engine will stall in the middle of the road? That can't be. They were just on the same way. And that's right. Nika turned to the police station, turned off the engine, mentally thanked the car. God, this man. By the way, and here he is, the crossover parked next to her. As luck would have it, compared to this man's car, Nika's jalopy looked even more wretched, like a rusty bucket with bolts that was long overdue for replacement. They entered the station without talking silently. The man stopped the first officer he met on the way, who was familiar to him. Well, how is it? Any news? The man asked. No, we haven't found any yet. And Nika was looking for the right office. She turned the corner from where a hoarse bass voice echoed throughout the entire department. Let me out of here, fucking cop! The voice belonged to her father. Damn her! Nika looked into the right office. Do you hear that? The policeman muttered discontentedly. Nika fidgeted in her chair, listening to what her father had done. He ran out onto the road, stopped a government motorcade, resisted arrest, plus insulting representatives of the authorities, representatives of the law. Excuse me. Nika was burning with shame. You see, after the death of his grandmother, his mother, his father, he went a little nuts. It's not true. My father is not crazy. He just has such a character. Nasty, sometimes naive, stubborn. He considered himself right always and in everything. I won't take my eyes off him, Nika promised firmly. Please let him go. He's an elderly man, and he suffers from hypertension. And his father has chronic bronchitis. He can't get cold. Get cold? The policeman grinned. I agree. Your father is not dressed for the weather. It's freezing outside and he's walking around town in a t-shirt and tights. Why don't you keep an eye on him, young lady? He looks decent, except for the cemetery dirt stuck to his shoes. I'm keeping an eye on him. I will keep an eye on him, Nika promised fervently. I'll take him to the doctor. It's about time. He needs to be isolated from society. The policeman sighed heavily. The shouts in the corridor did not stop. Nika's father was pouring choice curses on everyone who was careless enough to pass by him. They laughed at him, threatened him, but he was not so easy to intimidate. Okay, the policeman said condescendingly. I'll write you a fine for the first time, but keep in mind, he cut Nika off when she stood up enthusiastically. Next time I won't spare him, either to prison or to a mental hospital. The court will decide. Thank you, Nika quickly smiled, but seeing the amount of the fine, her smile slowly disappeared from her face. They released my father. That's the main thing. And what's also important is that he silently went out onto the porch. It was chilly, but he didn't even shudder. He only muttered, turning around. The devils! Dad, shut up! His daughter scolded him. Why did you run out into the road? I wanted to ask why my pension is so meager. I worked in a hazardous industry for over 40 years. My health was ruined. You have a normal pension, Nika objected. She exhaled loudly and tensed up again. They were being watched from the SUV and eavesdropped, judging by the lowered window. And prices are rising like crazy, grumbled the father, moving towards the car. People are late for work, and these guys drive around in limousines, blocking the roads. Everyone has to wait for them. Dad, what difference does it make to you? Nika whispered hoarsely, trying not to look at the man who was lounging behind the wheel. Are you late? You don't even work. So sit there in retirement, watch TV, play cards with the guys in the yard. Where did you go? Where you needed to go. That's where you went. Eggs don't teach a hen. Father went there every day. Why? Nika didn't know. She tried to follow him a couple of times, but surveillance didn't bring any special results. Father would come to the square, sit on a bench by the fountain, 3 pathetic streams, and stare at something. Was it covered in honey or something? As if there were no other benches in the city.